There's a dark and bloody period in Egyptian history that you may not know about. And nope, we're not talking about anything the pharaohs did, we're talking about the Rابعة massacre, which took place 10 years ago on August the 14th, 2013. Many call it the worst mass killing of protesters in a single day in recent history, and the day the Arab Spring ended, and it still haunts many Egyptians to this day. So what happened at Rابعة? Following General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's military coup in July of that year, thousands of Egyptians gathered in demonstrations across the country. They were calling for a return to democracy and for Egypt's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, to be reinstated to power. The largest of these mass protests was at Rabaa al-Adawiyya Square in Cairo, where an estimated 85,000 pro-democracy protesters, both members of the Muslim Brotherhood and non-partisan civilians, staged a sit-in protest for 6 weeks. Egyptian authorities had promised a gradual dispersal of these protests and safe exits for demonstrators. But at 6 AM on August the 14th, Egyptian security forces blocked off the exits to the square and opened fire on the demonstrators. They used armoured military vehicles, tear gas, live ammunition and snipers in an attack that lasted roughly 12 hours and killed at least 817 protesters. Most of the casualties were reported to have been shot in the head, neck and chest. The dead and injured were taken to the hospital in the square, and there were so many casualties and dead bodies that Rabaa Mosque was used as a makeshift medical facility and later a morgue. Towards the end of the operation, military forces violently emptied out the Rabaa hospital and mosque and set fire to the buildings, including the corpses of those killed and the wounded protesters who are still alive. Those killed included women, children, and the journalists who were covering the demonstrations. And it doesn't end there, because families who were later claiming the bodies of their loved ones were forced to accept death certificates that stated natural causes of death for the protesters that were killed. Following the massacre, an extensive Human Rights Watch report concluded that Egyptian security forces used excessive lethal force and indiscriminate deliberate attacks on largely peaceful protesters.
What we know, and what is actually a matter of public record, is that the highest levels of government officials in Egypt planned this dispersal. There was a very high-level meeting called of the most senior government officials,
including the Interior Minister and then Defense Minister Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the top commanders in the army, who planned for and anticipated widespread deaths. The official narrative alleged that the protesters were armed, but the Human Rights Watch investigation found that of the 85,000 protesters at the square,
the Interior Ministry only found 15 guns in Rabaa Square and 8 police officers were killed.
Human rights organizations continuously called for investigations into the massacre and accountability for those responsible.
The evidence we have indicates that the Rabaa massacre likely amounted to a crime against humanity.
But 10 years on, only the protesters themselves have been referred to the courts. In our next and final episode in this short series, we'll explain why Egypt now is referred to as a republic of fear, and how Sisi's government has put much effort into ensuring something like those mass protests from 10 years ago won't happen again.